I am here today at the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, Korea. What do you think is the reason I have come to the museum today?
To a place so far away, but with so many similar histories as also very recent.
It is to meet Ana Vaz, a Brazilian filmmaker.
Artist and filmmaker Ana Vaz, who is gaining attention in both the film and art worlds, was born in 1986 in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. In her films, she is seen as expanding the boundaries of experimental film by including various themes such as nature and humans, colonialism, and the climate crisis. She has directed 18 films to date, and her feature debut, It Is Night in America, released in 2022, won awards at many film festivals, including the Locarno Film Festival.
And the Experimental Film and Video Festival in Seoul is currently being held here at the museum.
The Experimental Film and Video Festival in Seoul is Korea's one and only experimental film festival. As its name suggests, the festival exhibits the current trends of experimental film, showcasing works that stand out for their fresh and experimental spirit, no matter the content or form. The festival, which began in 2004, is now celebrating its 21st year. The festival has a competition section called X Now, and various other sections that introduce works and directors of experimental films, as well as the history of experimental films. Filmmaker Ana Vaz's works were introduced in detail in the Indie Visual section, which was co-organized by the Experimental Film and Video Festival in Seoul and the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, Korea. This year, a total of 15 works, including Ana Vaz's early short films, were screened in the Indie Visual section.
아나 바즈 작가님은 브라질 출신으로 지금 파리에서 활동하고 계신데 작품에서 다루고 있는 주제가 요즘 저희가 많이 관심을 갖고 있는 포스트 식민주의라거나 인류세 같은 주요한 주제들을 다루고 있기 때문에 한국의 젊은 작가님들도 많이 관심을 갖고 계셔서 함께 소통하고 대화할 수 있는 부분이 많은 작가님이기 때문에 모시게 되었습니다.
And I found out that filmmaker Ana Vaz would be visiting Korea for this year's festival through the Brazilian embassy's social media. I think this is an interesting topic, and actually this is the first time I have heard of an experimental film festival. So I wanted to find out more about experimental films. And this festival will feature a special exhibition on Brazilian filmmaker Ana Vaz. And I think there will be many events where Korean filmmakers and director Ana Vaz can interact. So, I thought I would be able to find out what kind of exchanges are happening between Korea and Brazil in the film or experimental film sectors. That is why I came to the festival site today in particular. Because there is an event called Artist Talk, where Ana Vaz and the audience can communicate each other. The Brazilian ambassador also came. Today's event began with the viewing of one of Ana Vaz's films. However, before the screening, an unusual performance took place. She sat on the floor of the dark theater and began reading something.
Cometido por uma humanidade insolente à fúria cósmica. Digo, os bárbaros imperialistas que venderam o melhor da sua fé à repetição de crimes inenarráveis. Em MMCA, atravessamos o rio da história para nos encontrarmos com um capítulo escondido, soterrado, da história moderna daquilo que chamamos hoje de Brasil. É o relato de um genocídio cometido contra os povos dali originários, guardiões de toda a luta e de todo o futuro. brutalmente perseguidos há mais de 500 anos.
After the reading, the screening of her film APMEAKI began. APMEAKI is a film about the history of the Waimiri Aturari, an Amazonian indigenous people who experienced forced evictions and massacres during the development of a highway, as well as the archive of drawings they left behind related to this history. It was my first experimental film. Compared to other films, it was short but intense. It felt like a film created without restrictions, breaking away from the formality of films I had known before.
O medo sempre me guiou para o que quero.
Then what kind of films are called experimental films?
Experimental film literally means films that experiment with themes or techniques. They are often considered non-commercial films and a subset of independent films. Avant-garde films from the 1920s, underground films from the 1960s in the US, and cinéma vérité from France are classified as modern experimental films. Experimental films reject the typical narrative structure, choose topics that are not usually covered in commercial films, and experiment with the possibilities of the film medium. In short, the significance of experimental film lies in the new attempt itself.
After the film screening, there was a talk with director Ana Vaz.
영화가 어떤 것이 될 수 있는지를 작품 안에서 본인의 방법으로 그거를 구현을 하고 계시고 아주 예전부터 지금까지 생각하고 있는 영화가 어떤 것이 될 수 있는지에 대한 그런 질문을 계속 갱신을 하고 있다고 생각합니다.
And to kind of go back to Inhan's reflection on what can cinema do, I think I fall into its tentacles, as if film was like a being, because I believe it's the medium that is the closest to human experience, to our experience of the world. Hence, I believe so much, perhaps blindly sometimes, that it really is a medium that can reconnect us to the world.
어쨌든 한국도 식민지배 이후에 전쟁과 냉전을 겪으면서 유사한 상황들을 만났던 얘기를 했고, 그래서 이것이 대상으로 보이는 역사가 아니라 우리의 역사와 같이 제게는 느껴졌다라고 APMEAKI 얘기를 아내에게 하기도 했습니다.
When I was studying film for the first time in Australia, actually, and I had the chance of meeting or falling into a film department that was very interested in experimental film, thing that I didn't know existed. And perhaps the most I think about it, I think that all of my work, perhaps, is made as a consequence of this first dislocation from my city of origin to a place so far away, but with so many similar histories as also a very recent colony, a very recent place in which the traumas of colonization are so there, and with a community of people who have already been working on criticizing this very, very close history for so long.
APMEAKI is about what happened in Brazil, but similar events are happening not only in Brazil, but all over the world. Maybe that is why I was also able to empathize with the message that her films were trying to convey.
It was my greatest concern.
While viewing her film, I was able to discover a universal theme that many people could relate to in a specific incident. I felt that the distance between me and director Ana Vaz had decreased. I wondered if other viewers felt the same way.
사실 실험 영화라는 것들이 어떤 다양한 맥락들을 담을 수 있는데 그런 것들이 오늘 아나바즈 감독님의 작업에서도 드러났듯이 어떤 지역이나 어떤 특정 문화에 대한 이야기를 하더라도 거기서부터 시작해서 굉장히 보편적인 이야기들을 많이 할 수 있는 역량을 가진 장르라는 생각이 들어요. 그런 측면에서 이렇게 다양한 국제적으로 활동하는 작가들이 이제 한데 모여서 특히 우리나라에 모여서 어떤 교류 활동을 할 수 있다는 것은 이제 영화 매체의 발전이라든지 이제 영화 매체가 무엇을 할 수 있는지 이제 가능성들을 상상해 볼 수 있는 측면에서도 되게 의미가 있다고 생각합니다.
The following day, I visited the Brazilian embassy. I wanted to talk to the ambassador about filmmaker Ana Vaz and exchange in the film industry between Korea and Brazil.
Very well, very busy. I told you that our first program that we did together had a huge audience, and so many people, get to greet me for the first time and tell me, "Oh, I saw you talking about Brazil in ARE on TV." So it's really great. You touch a lot of people, and this is great for an ambassador. Yes.
The Brazilian ambassador appeared on our program last May.
Science and technology.
I hope many people will see this episode as well, right?
I hope so, because I think Ana Vaz is an extraordinary young artist. She has an amazing sensibility to tell her story, that is a story about interaction between man and nature, and between man and man, in the sense of, our society that is more urban and modern, and the more traditional and indigenous populations. And I think the movie both of us saw yesterday tells such an important story about the impacts and how much they can be cruel, and what can we do in part to facilitate the interaction without so much violence, and in other part also to respect and restrict. And I can say that the current Brazilian administration is very sensitive to that. We have a ministry for indigenous populations, for instance, that takes care of this kind of situation and controlling the impact.
Filmmaker Ana Vaz also had the opportunity to interact with Korean audiences and filmmakers during her visit to Korea. And I discovered through my research that there has been a lot of cooperation between Korea and Brazil in the film industry throughout the years.
Did you know that film is a key word that connects Korea and Brazil? In 2013, the Korean Film Council attended the 37th Sao Paulo International Film Festival held in Brazil. As a result of their attendance, the festival held a special exhibition on new Korean directors and a forum for establishing cooperation measures in the Korean-Brazil film industry. And here, an MOU for comprehensive collaboration in the film industry between Korea and Brazil was signed. The Korean Film Council and the Brazilian Film Agency, known as ANCINE, promised to promote exchanges between Korean and Brazilian filmmakers and support the mutual promotion and co-production of films from both countries. In 2017, a Korean-Brazilian film workshop was held in Sao Paulo under the theme for communication between Korean and Brazilian films. Also, there are film festivals that introduce Korean films in Brazil and Brazilian films in Korea. Through these festivals, Korea and Brazil have been consistently introducing each other's films to the public.
I wondered if there would be active exchanges between Korea and Brazil in the film industry in the future.
So how can Korea and Brazil interact and cooperate in the film sector in the future?
This is very interesting, because I think there's a lot of interest in that area. We just got in early June the visit of our Vice Minister of Culture. He met a number of agencies and institutions here in Korea, and he told us two things. So first is that there is a huge interest in Brazil to explore avenues of cooperating with Korea for co-production of movies for the film industry. The second thing he told us is that we are in the process of negotiating and memorandum of understanding and cultural cooperation more broadly. That would not be restricted to film. It would encompass a lot more areas of common interest. And the third thing he said is that there will be a huge Brazilian delegation to the Busan International Film Festival. We are also showing on the sidelines of the Busan International Film Festival, there will be a Latin American Film Festival. It's a regular initiative. We always go there. We are coming this year again. We don't yet have a movie that was selected, but this year I had the chance to watch a very interesting Brazilian movie in the cycle of Portuguese-speaking movies that was presented in an individual foundation, in a private foundation here in Seoul. And that movie is really so great that I would try to exhibit it here in the embassy. It's called Bacurau. So I expect that there will be much more interaction in the future. This is very fantastic that you can do it. Yeah.
After finishing my interview with the ambassador, I headed back to the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, Korea. Another exchange between Korean filmmakers and Ana Vaz has opened. It was a masterclass with Korean experimental film directors.
How's South Korea treating you?
I'm totally amazed and in love in many ways, because my biggest shock has been how much, of course, only at this time of the year, it makes me think a little bit of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil because of the mountains and the humidity and the kind of tropical feeling of it, but in Asia. So it's really a really nice feeling, actually.
I can't tell you the specifics because the conversation was very personal. But it was a place where participants could comfortably share their thoughts and concerns.
Where do you feel more at ease best?
I think...
Yeah, it's a hard feeling.
Yeah.
I've been speaking with a lot of fellow friends, and
I think the dark lighting created an atmosphere that made it easier for everyone to talk. After the masterclass, I had the opportunity to talk with the Korean experimental film director who had participated in the class.
먼저 감독님 소개를 좀 부탁드릴게요.
네. 저는 실험 영화를 만들고 있는 김진수라고 하고, 최근에는 제가 경주에서 살았던 어린 시절에 보았던 목이 없는 불상, 이런 것들을 주제로 촬영을 하고 있고요. 또 그런 것들을 통해서 뭔가 기록하고 싶은 욕망, 어떤 게 기록되고 있고 어떤 게 파괴되려고 하는지, 또 그런 뭔가 여러 가지 불상과 관련돼서 여러 가지 관계들을 뭔가 탐구하고 있고 또 촬영하고 있습니다.
Kim Jin-soo is a director who has been making experimental films since 2018. He has made a total of 6 experimental films so far. His films were also screened at the Experimental Film and Video Festival in Seoul last year.
이제 오늘 아나바즈 감독님과 또 다른 감독님들이랑 함께하는 마스터 클래스에 참석하셨는데 어떤 이야기들을 좀 나누셨고 참석하고 난 이후의 소감 어떠셨는지 궁금해요.
실험 영화 감독들, 영상 작업하신 분들이 많았는데, 이제 관객들과 영화와 또 어떤 관계를 만들어야 더 좋은 영화를 만들 수 있을까? 이제 영화란 뭘까? 이런 되게 넓은 주제의 얘기를 했었고요. 또 개인적으로 이제 어떤 작업을 하는지 그런 서로 돌아가면서 알아가는 시간도 있었습니다. 같은 문화지만 이제 좀 다른 작업 방향으로 나아가기도 하고 또 비슷한 작업을 하기도 하고, 이런 각자의 경험을 이렇게 공유하는 시간이 사실 되게 뜻깊었던 것 같습니다. 제가 당연하게 생각했던 걸 더 다시 생각해 보기도 하고, 그래서 또 중요한 것 같습니다.
And now, it is the time to talk with director Ana Vaz. I also wanted to have a comfortable conversation, so I decided to conduct the interview where the masterclass was held. Actually, there was one question that I had wanted to ask since yesterday's movie screening.
To be completely honest, I watched an experimental movie for the first time while preparing for this interview, so it was very unique and intense and somewhat interesting. But as a TV producer, I think about how to make the program easier and more understandable. So I was curious why you choose the form of experimental movie as a medium to convey your message to people.
Whilst you as a TV producer is asking how people can understand things more easily, my question is a different question. My question would be, how can we elicit different forms of feeling, experience, emotions in a filmic environment in which you don't have a map? And so for me, there's a level of complexity, mystery, and sensation that is very important for us to awaken a different kind of intelligence that we all have inside of us. And that intelligence does not need a map. That intelligence does not need for people to tell you what to think. Because I believe through my practice that the audience is always more intelligent than me. And they're always able, like you were, I'm sure, to sense, feel, and understand something from these films, because I give you the freedom to think through your own means.
Oh, I really like that answer.
You know, I trust that you can, and I'm sure that you have.
Oh, so you give more freedom to your audience to think more freely, right?
I give them like space, because if you think in terms of like classical film productions, they're made in a way that it's as if your audience is not intelligent. They don't know. So you need to treat them like they don't know. So you need to tell them, here you need to feel sad, here you need to feel happy, here you need to understand, here. You guide them all the time, and you direct them, and you manipulate them all the time. If we strive for a society that it's freer, more democratic, more aware, more conscious, more responsible, in order to combat the horrendous crisis that we're traversing politically, environmentally, socially, then we have to trust and give the tools for people to think for themselves.
So can you tell me how important it is for artists to interact with artists from other countries?
I think it's vital. I fully believe that more dialogue, more open conversation, and more encounters between the different cultures of the south of the world, South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, all of these political, social, and spiritual realities have a lot to say to one another. And even though we may be miles away from one another, there are many similarities that we can draw from our experiences. And by bringing these similarities together, we can draw on different ways to respond to these different forms of oppression, difficulties, differences. But most importantly, to understand that there are essential feelings and ideas that connect us in a very deep way. And so connecting these people is about, again, strengthening these ideas and finding tools in which to build better forms of solidarity, of cooperation, of culture exchange, and of diversity in a world that very unfortunately, as we see in politics, is being weakened of its diversity with political agendas that are all about an identitarian, fake notion of the self and of the nation state as a pure identity. And we know that we don't live in a world that is like this. We are the sons and daughters of a global world, and hence we are the sons and daughters of the clash and the encounter of cultures. this is what makes culture. Culture is exactly that. You know? And so spending time together in the presence of difference, for me, is a political exercise.
This week, I had the opportunity to experience firsthand the exchange between Korean and Brazilian artists. At first, I thought an experimental film by a Brazilian filmmaker would be very different in form and content that has nothing to do with me. However, after watching the film, I felt that what happened in a faraway country like Brazil could also happen in Korea or anywhere in the world, and that it was something that was deeply related to me. After meeting Ana Vaz, a cultural diplomat who connects Korea, Brazil, and the world, I think I will look at the world I live in from a slightly different perspective.
(2020년에) 아카데미아키를 보고 그 해에 가장 제게 인상 깊었던 개인적인 베스트로 이 영화를 꼽고
And knowing how to deal with precarity in a joyful and strong, competent way gives us a lot of energy and strength.